Good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Daring Dialogues Black Table Talk. I am your host today, Shantae Charles. I am excited because this morning we have with us a special guest. We are in conversation today with Dr. Dianne M. Stewart. I do want to make you aware that she is feeling under the weather today, but she is here with us and she is doing her very best to power through this conversation. So please give her some grace today as we talk about her book, Black Women, Black Love. Just a brief introduction to Dr. Stewart before she joins us on platform. Dr. Stewart is the Samuel Candler Dobbs Professor of Religion and African American Studies at Emory University, and she is the author of Black Women, Black Love, America's War on African American Marriage. Audiences can connect with her on Twitter at Dianne M. Stewart. They can also connect with her on Facebook and Instagram at Dianne M. Stewart, PhD. And so I will not withhold time further and introduce you to Dr. Dianne M. Stewart. Good morning, good morning, good morning.
Good morning, Shantae. Thank you for hosting me today.
We are so very glad to have you here on the platform with us. As you know, we talked a little bit before about our platform taking the time to read through your book, Black Women, Black Love, America's War on African American Marriage. I will say for myself, reading through this from cover to cover, that it is probably one of the most impactful readings that I have read in a really long time. That really outlines a lot of things that African American women have faced in this country and continue to face. So I want to hear from you. Tell us about the impetus and the inspiration behind your book.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing my work with your audiences. It means a lot to me to know that the work is being disseminated in the spaces and arenas that I wanted to see it be read. So it means a tremendous amount to me. Um, and I feel really gratified to hear you talk about how informative the book was for you, because I truly broke from my typical scholarly pattern of my own research in terms of my training and my expertise to write this book. You know, I'm a scholar of religion and theology, and I began to teach a course just called Black Love back in the early 2000s. And in teaching that course, it's funny when people hear that, they think romantic love right away. But believe it or not, romantic love was just a small section on that course.
Mhm.
In that course, it was just a very teeny section at the back. And as I began to do research for the course, I was absolutely floored by what I was seeing
Yeah.
about love and marriage among heterosexual Black women and men. The stats were so low. Even though I had lived this in a certain way, I had lived the conversations through my college days and through my graduate school days and through my young adult days. I had lived the conversation that, for every eligible Black man, there are 7 eligible Black women, for example. I
Mhm.
just never knew how dire it was. And I say dire for the Black women who want to be married. I am not assuming, Shantae, that every
Mhm.
Black woman wants to be married or wants to be married at a particular time in her life. Women might change their minds at different times, but there are millions who do want to be married and who have
Mhm.
voiced their concerns about being married. So as I began to read what the social scientists were saying, um, and began to see a broader structural problem that I felt was not being addressed in any of the public conversations. At
Yeah.
best, you might hear one or two people mention mass incarceration and the lower numbers of Black men who might be available for Black women. At best, one might hear that once in a while. But the conversations in the public domain were often divisive between Black women and men. They were often conversations that asked Black women to fix themselves. And
Yeah.
as I say by the end of the book, I am not against self help. I think every human being should be trying to improve themselves all the time. So
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with self help. But to
Right.
throw self help at this problem, I began to see was wrong. When I taught the Black Love course again after many years in 2016, and now I've made it a staple. And I realized I've got to write about this because I began to see phenomena, um, or what we might call epiphenomena, different kinds of structural forces that impeded Black women's ability to find love, to couple, and to get married without delay, difficulty, or maybe just straight out denial
Yeah.
throughout the life cycle. And I felt that we needed to bring a structural analysis to the problem. And what's interesting for me, that structural analysis began with the slave ship. And I take it all the way up to social media in the book from chapters 1 through 5. I felt that my community needed this book. And in many respects, I write this book with the heterosexual Black woman in mind, but I'm
Mhm.
also writing to Black men.
Mhm.
The students were the one who said, Dr. Stewart, you talk about Black men as much as you do Black women in this book, pretty much.
Yes.
And so I'm hoping that through this publication, this collection of information, we can reignite a new conversation among Black women and Black men about heterosexual coupling, love, and marriage.
Well, I want to say personally, this book, um, I feel like it puts so many threads together in one place to make Black women understand that you're not crazy.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
You're not crazy. What you're experiencing is more structural than it is you needing to fix yourself.
Yes.
There's a structure that needs to be addressed. And you've done that so beautifully, like you said, starting with enslavement and bringing it all the way up to the present, helping us to understand how these issues are interwoven and how they interconnect. And it's interesting that you say early 2000s because I myself, as a writer, I focus more on fiction writing, but I
Mhm.
began writing a series called Church Love in the year 2004. And my goal around it was to sort of tackle some of the issues that you're actually tackling here through research, but do it in an entertaining manner,
Mhm.
but also be educational. And as you said, there was not a whole lot of conversation, especially in the early 2000s, happening around this. I will say there was one film that sort of let me know that this was an issue that really needed to be brought to the forefront, and that was the film Something New.
Mhm.
It stars Sanaa Lathan, and in that film, it was all of those layers that you were talking about. The ladies in the one film scene were sitting at the table and they were talking about the dearth of good Black men. And they were saying, well, they're either, same gender loving, or they're incarcerated. So they did sort of begin to start bringing that conversation into that film. But that was really as far as you saw it. And the premise of that film was, hey, go look somewhere else, right? And so there wasn't even a emphasis on what can we do to deal with these structures. It was simply, well, just go outside of of your ethnic demographic as the quote unquote solution. So I really think that this work that you've presented, that you've put out into the world, I think we'll look back 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now and understand the the importance and the gravity of what you have set in this work. Which is why I'm so glad to have you on the platform to be able to talk to you in person about it. And so I want to ask you the question, why do you feel it's so important to draw a line and connect the dots between our past enslavement and our present day conditions in our relationships?
That's a very good question. And one of the things that I constantly hear Black women asking is, what can we do right now to deal with this? And one of my messages, well, first of all, there are many things we can do, and
Mm-hmm.
we can have short-sighted goals and long-sighted goals. I am the scholar who wrote this book especially for long-sighted goals. And so the reason it was very important to start with slavery and trace these phenomena across time. And let me be clear, because I don't want the historians to get me on this. Let me talk about what I did was in doing so, I was able to name this phenomenon as forbidden Black love. And what I mean by that, I say that this forbidden Black love is established through four major pillars. And there could be others, but these are the ones I continue to observe across time. But to make sure that the historians don't get on me, it's not that I'm saying the exact reasons um, that for the exact reasons that forbidden Black love was experienced in slavery is exactly the same exact reasons that we're experiencing forbidden Black love today. I
Right.
think they change over time, but the pillars are pretty much standard. The separation of Black couples and families, that's one.
Mm-hmm.
Two, what I would call misogynoir or racist, sexist legislation, policies, and legal transactions. Three, the sexual and reproductive violation of Black women. And four, colorism and phenotypic stratification. We see those all operating in slavery, and we see them repeating themselves in new configurations across time. Certainly, there are
Yeah.
socioeconomic changes and transitions in American life that exacerbate these issues. There's no doubt about it. The movement of jobs outside of American urban centers, particularly low skill jobs, to developing nations, things like that, has definitely impacted the preparedness of a number of Black men and even women for marriage. But these four structural issues I trace throughout the book.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it was important to show that this has happened over and over and over, and that Black love and marriage has been under attack in many respects across the centuries, and that the problem is not a middle class Black woman's problem. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
working class Black woman's problem or a poor Black woman's problem. It's Black women's problem. And
Yeah.
in chapter 5, I cite a study that was done from a large data set in the 1990s, the mid 1990s, that show that Black women at the time of survey who had been previously married, never married,
Mm-hmm.
or currently married were pretty much even across educational status. It didn't matter if you were a woman without a GED or a high school diploma or a woman with a post baccalaureate degree. We were
Mm-hmm.
pretty much in the same boat. I mean, almost exact numbers across the board.
Wow.
So this is a problem of Black women's and Black men's involuntary presence in America.
Mm-hmm.
And what doing this, what tracing this across time allowed me to see is that this is America's unrecognized civil rights issue. If I did not trace it across time, I would not have come to the awareness that this is actually a civil rights issue. And Black people, Black women in particular, are excellent at pursuing civil rights. I
Mhm.
mean, it's so sad that I feel like I'm living in a country right now where I'm like, is this 1889? I mean, really, I'm beginning to feel like, forget, Mississippi 1959. I really feel like I'm living in 1889. And once again, we are having to be on the front lines, struggling for basic rights as Black people in this country. But what I wanted to do is raise to the level of awareness among Black people who are activists, who are working on all kinds of policy issues, to raise
Mhm.
the level of awareness that the inability for Black women to find marriageable Black male partners is a civil rights issue, and it should be put on our activist agendas. That was what it allowed me to do. And let me say, in all of that, in chapter 5, I named 3 issues we must address. I'm not going to give them all here. Make your readers go out and buy it. If we're going to, if we're going, your audiences, I should say, if we're going to turn a corner on this problem.
Yes.
And I'll just talk about one of them, which is really important about why starting in slavery and coming up to today matters. And it has to do with what I term inherited poverty and wealthlessness
Mhm.
in, in the Black community. When we look at the fact that Black people were deprived of accumulating wealth for 10 generations due to enslavement, racial based chattel enslavement, that reality has impacted Black life across the centuries and has even been compounded by other forms of discrimination, policy violence against Black people across the centuries, such that many Black women and men do not feel that they have adequate wealth resources to be able to take up the responsibility of marriage. If there was no other reason to start in slavery and bring the conversation up to the present day, it was that reason in and of itself. So those are the reasons I want to elevate this problem to the level of civil rights, and I want Black women and men to begin to think about. I think, like as I said before, I will never condone adults not showing up for the children in our lives.
Mhm.
We need to figure out what it is we need to do to heal and be well so that we can show up for one another. All of that matters. But I also want us to be able to have a space where we can talk as Black women and men about not just all the things that we do so wrong and so um in toxic ways, or whatever it is that we might participate in
Mhm.
many respects, as symptoms of these structural problems, or trying to navigate the lack of resources. But I want us to pay attention to what has been done to us. It matters. We have suffered tremendous trauma and deprivation of resources, which include human resources, life partners,
Yes.
the resources and the space and the peace to create family. And at the same time, we have many, many, many examples of Black people doing that against the odds. And so,
Ye-
even though I focus on the structural impediments, I don't ever want audiences to think that we don't have phenomenal examples of Black people doing this against the odds. But what I say to people, if we want more Black men to show up for their children, we need to address these structural problems. Not
Yes.
all the Black men out there who are not showing up for their children are not showing up because they're just horrible people with no conscience.
Right.
That is just not true.
You're absolutely right.
We need to, if we want many more to start showing up, we need to address these structural problems, period. Yes,
Yes.
we can talk about personal responsibility from here until the ends of the earth. But if people don't have the resources, they don't have the opportunities, the
Mhm.
true opportunities
Yes.
to secure gainful employment, to find um, to educate themselves, right? To train themselves to do better in life. How are we really going to work ourselves around these problems? And I, I, I want audiences to know that I knew of no other book out there that actually did this kind of work. And that's the reason I wrote it. I couldn't find a book that addressed it in this way.
You're absolutely right. I will tell you the closest I have seen, um, the closest I've seen to this work was maybe 2008, 2009. There was a book by a one moment out. There we go. And as Dr. Stewart takes a break here, I will say that there was a book I saw in around 2000, maybe 2009, 2010. Um, it was called Getting Serious About Getting Married. And the author's name was Debbie Macon. She was a white female author, and she was primarily speaking to her population. She was speaking to her ethnic group, and it was a really good work, and it was a really good work. But she had one sliver in there addressing African American women.
Mm,
And that one part in there, and she was right. She was sort of speaking to some of these issues on a granular level, but she was telling Black women, look, these things are being specifically done to hinder you. And because of that one sliver in her work, oh, she was dragged.
wow,
She was
interesting.
dragged for addressing anything to do with Black women and their relationships. But that was a really good look into, she was talking about some of the structural things, but it was for white women
Yes.
about how they needed to get serious, that if you were wanting to be married, you had to be intentional. And she was talking about the ways in which you had to be intentional. This here is like that times a million
Yes.
in terms of, yes, Black women have been intentional, but here are the structural things and issues that stand in the way, even when you have the best of intentions.
Right. That's
And I
right.
think that's so important. Another thing that you mentioned here is about the economics, the deprivation of wealth. And I know that's a huge conversation right now where I feel like Black men and Black women are sort of weaponizing this economics piece against each other when they really should be looking at the system that has caused the deprivation.
Yes.
So whether it's the conversation around quote unquote high value men
Right.
or high value women, or whether or not your degree means that you have to find someone who's just as educated as you, I think all of those conversations are conversations that really need to look at what has happened in our country that has caused these inequities, even within our own demographics. And we shouldn't be using those things and weaponizing them against each other in relationships. We should be addressing, why is it that Black men are having a hard time being gainfully employed? Why is it that you're willing to give the Black woman the six-figure income, but oftentimes the Black man may not be getting that six-figure position or that six-figure job? So you're putting this inequity there, right? That's causing some of the friction. But if we look at what has happened, Black men have often been shut out of the economics of this country. We had a whole civil rights movement with what? The signs that people were carrying during that time. When MLK went down to talk about the workers' rights, they were all holding signs that said what? I am a man. Because that lack of economics was a challenge to that idea of manhood. So we're also talking about ways in which we define womanhood, ways in which we define manhood. And as you said, if you're defining manhood by economics, but yet you're shutting Black men out of the prospects of earning income, what are we doing? What
Yes.
are we doing?
Yes, I agree fully. The one thing that I do want to be careful about, and it depends on which stats that people look at, Black
Mhm.
women are still grossly underpaid for the same positions that white women, white men, and Black men perform. So we
Yes.
want to be, we really don't want to. I am not at a place in terms of what I've seen in the stats where I'm willing to say, that, oh, that Black women are being promoted for these six-figure jobs and Black men aren't. I think we if Black men are doing those same jobs, they are getting paid more than Black
Yes.
women. It might be that more and more Black men are being locked out of those kinds of jobs because of the impact of mass incarceration and other kinds of impediments. But I do want us to be aware that Black women are lowest on the totem pole when it comes onto racial gender equity in pay um,
Yes.
per assignment. And that's important because for me, it's not a competition. I
Right.
believe that we as raced beings, raced persons in male bodies and female bodies experience that racism in very distinct ways. And it's they are both incredibly traumatic. And what I hope is that we would have sympathy for one another rather
Yes.
than bicker with one another. And one of
Right.
the reasons I felt, I mean, because it took a lot of courage to write this book. I'm not a historian by training. I'm not a social scientist by training. I'm a humanist. I'm a scholar of religion and theology. But I I was also a little concerned about the fact that it seemed like the people who were out there talking about this issue the most were Black men, telling Black women what to do, and even producing films and different things. It just seemed like
Yes.
Black men were the ones, and I'm thinking, well, we need some Black women to weigh in on this conversation. And
Yes.
so even the notion of a high status man, what is that? My father had a GED. My father had probably a fifth grade education, and then when he came to America, um, ended up with a GED, and was married to my mother, and still is. They're both alive. I'm fortunate to say that they're both alive. And so, is my father not a marriageable man because he is not a high status man according
Mhm.
to those criteria? Where are
Right.
the high status men supposed to come from when we look at all the barriers to Black men moving forward and being able to achieve that level of financial independence, um, and employment status? Where are they supposed to come from ultimately? And the other thing that we have to remember, and this is why I talk about not salary but wealth. When Black men and
Mhm.
even Black women make it into those high status, quote unquote, positions, those six-figure plus positions, oftentimes they're taking care of auntie and little sister and they have what we call wealth spread in social science research. They are charged with helping so many people in the family that there could be all kinds of reasons. And I haven't seen the data on this. What I do know is that Black men who are upper middle class and upper class marry later in life than their white male counterparts, if they marry at all. And so you wonder, um, might there even be issues around whether or not more um, queer men are making it up into the upper echelons of society versus heterosexual men? I would love to get figures on that. It would be interesting to even know that. And then
Mhm.
two, um, whether or not these men are often charged with having to care for other family members and even Black women who make it into those positions, because salary is not the same as wealth. Most of
Right.
us have little to no wealth to fall back on, even if we earn good salaries. And
Yes.
that's not a safety net for the building of a family. It's not a safety net for a future. And this is
Yes.
one of the reasons I am totally gung ho about reparations,
Mhm.
especially financial reparations for people of African descent. whose ancestors were enslaved in this country. When it comes down to reparations for slavery, we can talk about reparations for a number of things. I
Mhm.
have learned from one of my amazing colleagues, Dr. Janera Easley, that you know what? We can get reparations, but if we don't fix the policy issues, we're going to lose all of that money in 2 generations. Wow. Wow.
Yes.
A
And
very
that's,
powerful. So we need reparations, but we need to address racist anti-Black policies that ultimately harm our communities.
I often say on this platform that racism is spelled Policy. That
Wow.
is how it is spelled. And when people talk about racism, I say, people often define it as, prejudice plus power. But I say it's actually prejudice plus power plus policy
Yes.
that perpetuates the prejudice.
Yes.
It
Well said.
enshrines it. It enshrines the prejudice. And
Well,
so that's what we're dealing with in the United States of America.
and keep in mind, Shantae, we're dealing with that in a country that has created these impenetrable, it seems, mythologies about itself, that this
Mhm.
is a democratic society. And we have an ideal in mind when we think about democracy, that this is a society that rewards hard work, that rewards people who pull themselves up by their bootstraps, as if African Americans even had boots after slavery, that this is a society where those who are doing well because of something that they have intrinsically, and that those who aren't are not doing well because of some defect in them. And
Mhm.
all of those mythologies need to be debunked.
Yes.
Democracy in America has always been racist.
Mhm.
It's always excluded Black people. So, how can we have an ideal in our head that democracy includes everyone? If
Mhm.
democracy has been racist, it's also been sexist, it's also been classist historically, right? So, how can we have in our mind that this is some sort of ideal society that truly rewards effort? We
Yeah.
probably have enough examples from our own families to know that it does not reward effort.
Right. I mean, and if you think about just Dr. Claude Anderson, he often talks about the amount of wealth in this nation that is simply frozen. It's not going in, it's not going out, but it is frozen in one aspect and simply being passed down generation to generation. And I know you mentioned Dr. Dorothy Brown's work, The Whiteness of Wealth, in your work, which we're actually reading on Fridays. So I was able to immediately make that connection um, in the ways in which, with the percentage of wealth in the United States that is not frozen, as you said, we're still having to take care of our families in so many different ways. So even the wealth that we're trying to gather and build, because we have those family members that don't have the same opportunities as us, we often find ourselves, like she said, pulling from our reserves in order to care for our extended family members, in order to care for our elderly population. So just trying to say that wealth or the amount of money someone makes defines their marriageability is problematic. And as Dr. Stewart takes a break here, um, put in the comment section, what defines wealth for you? What defines wealth for you? Those of you who are watching us live, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us for Black Table Talk. I am your host, Shantae Charles, and we're having a conversation today about Black women, Black love, and really Black futures. So think about that question. Drop your answer into the comments. What do you think? How do you define wealth? Do you define it as your salary? Do you define it as, how much money, how much savings you have? What is your definition of wealth? Is it just monetary? Or do we really actually need to examine what we see wealth as a whole, as a people?
Shantae, one of the things that I think is so important, well, in the book, I talk about financial wealth and kinship wealth as well. And we have traditionally, I think, been very strong on kinship wealth. But one of the points I make is if we don't have financial wealth, then the burden is on the one or two who can make it into a position where they have a good salary to provide for family members who are always in need. So we need and deserve both. And one of the things I discovered in doing this book, I've always been a Democrat. Um, and I've always, I had foggy glasses in how I looked at the Democratic Party for a long time. And what I mean by that, I think I always contrasted the Democratic Party with the Republican Party. But writing this book really helped me to see that in many respects, as it relates to anti Black policy violence, they're basically in the same boat. Um,
Mhm.
there definitely are differences. There's no doubt about it. And I think the Democrats can offer some band-aid solutions here or there, or offer some solutions that allow one or two blacks who are in the middle class to, to have a few more comforts here or there. But by and large, the significant problem, this country has never taken responsibility for enslaving millions of black people and turning them out to fend for themselves after slavery in the midst of Jim Crow
Mhm.
violence and terror, and to have to recover from that in many respects, to move from rural areas to urban areas, from the south to north to the northern urban areas, be placed in slums and later to be placed in projects, um, always without adequate analysis of the historical foundations of the problems that the government is supposedly trying to treat, and the full suite of resources needed to treat them. There have always been ways where the responses have ultimately blamed black people for being ultimately enslaved in this country, and um, and being victims of racial violence in this country. There are ways that this government has never fully taken responsibility and adequately accounted for the resource deprivation that it has subjected Black people to. And that is at the level of the federal government, the level of state government as well. It's just never happened, whether Democratic or Republican. It's never happened. We see what happened under the Clinton era with the three strikes regulation.
Yes.
I mean, what was that? That was nothing but poor analysis or no analysis of what was, no sympathy, total antipathy for what was ailing Black communities, poor Black vulnerable communities who were dealing with the crack epidemic. And the way that we can realize that there's total antipathy toward Black pain and Black suffering and vulnerability is when we see how governments and states respond to, for example, the opioid crisis, which for a long time had the
Yes.
face of a white woman.
Mhm.
Um, we know that blacks are suffering from this crisis as well, but for a long time it had that face. And there was a much more sympathy. There was no criminalization after slavery, since slavery. What this country has done, Democrat or Republican, has been to criminalize the Black body, to criminalize Black freedom and Black movement.
Mhm.
And and we have never adequately addressed those realities. Immediately at the end of slavery, President Lincoln signed land grants, an act that would provide land for barely more than a filing fee for
Right.
most white Americans. Very
Mhm.
negligible blacks benefited from these different land grants over the course of, a century. Um, Very few benefited. We had European immigrants coming in and getting free land, and black people sitting by and watching this happen, which allowed excuse me, which allowed white America to build a solid middle class The
Mhm.
wealth that was built from the land grants that tens of thousands of whites received in this country going out west is unbelievable. And then was just reinforced um, with the New Deal, with the GI Bill, where white veterans were um, allowed a number of privileges. I'm not saying that Black veterans didn't benefit, but the numbers are negligible. And
Mhm.
what happened was this bill was executed, was implemented at the local level in very racist offices, in states where the the racism of those implementing the bill was not checked. There were no checks and balances for how the bill would be implemented. And so Black soldiers would often get the worst equipment if they were signing up for classes. They were denied jobs. Um,
Mhm.
they were denied access to housing loans, whereas white soldiers and veterans were getting these benefits and privileges, which solidly built them as a middle class. Um,
And
in,
that's one of the things I found very interesting about your work is some things I knew, about the GI Bill, but I also didn't know about the Civil War period and what was happening to women during that period with the their husbands and what was going on there, and then seeing that same pattern with the GI and how black women and black soldiers were treated, and then seeing that pattern again with women and how they were looked upon with welfare. It's like you could literally see each generation of women having to deal with almost being penalized
yes,
for either being married or being. So not only did you kind of show the barriers just overall, but you're really directing it to how are Black women being impacted by these systems in ways that
yes.
have not documented to this degree before. So again, I want to recommend that if you have not gotten her work, please invest. Every woman in your family should have a copy. Every man in your family should have a copy. College students, college age women should have a copy. Black women, Black love, America's War on African American Marriage. To close, I want the audience right now, just what would you want them to know um, as they're going to dive into your work? What's the main thing you want them to take away from your work?
I want them to realize that in the first two chapters, that are harder to read, I think, than the others, that our ancestors deserve to have their stories known by us. They deserve that. We have to read it, they had to live it. And I think it's truly important for us to understand that the fact that we are even here today is a miracle. How we were able, how our ancestors were able to survive what they did is absolutely unbelievable. But I want them to understand how what they survived did meddle with their love lives, did impact their love lives. That this is not a new phenomenon in so many words. So that's first of all, and that treating this issue across the centuries helps us to make the case for reparations, for policy changes, for um, placing, I honestly would like to see us place Black love, coupling, marriage, and family at the center of many of our policy decisions. If we do, we will be addressing issues such as public assistance, mass incarceration, housing. That's the one chapter I didn't write. The book was getting long enough. I wanted to write a chapter called A House to Love In. And
Mm,
I try to take it up a little bit in chapter 3 and a little bit in chapter 4. You see those housing issues coming through a little bit in those chapters. It really deserved its own chapter. But housing, maternal health, and infant mortality, all of these issues and more would be raised by placing Black love, coupling, marriage, and family at the center of our policy decisions and our activism. I would like audiences to ask themselves, what is it that I can do better as an individual to change the situation of love outcomes for Black people? And then what is it that I can do in concert with a wider group to help to see actionable outcomes? And I say that for all of America, not just Black people. I think all of America needs to take this problem up, not just Black people, as a problem that is systemic, that is structural, that needs to be addressed. So those are some of the things I'd like my audiences to know, and to know that I try to tell stories. And what I found, Shantae, about my stories is that none of the people who are featured in this book are stereotypes. That's what makes it so interesting. And it wasn't done on purpose. You read about these people across the centuries and you realize these are complex people wrestling with difficult dilemmas and trying to figure out, how do I how do I manage this? In some case it means that the slave master must die, even if it means that I will suffer consequences as a result of that. No, he will not rape me one more time. I will
mhm.
kill you. Right? Even if it's a consequence such as that, or it's a consequence such as, I, as a father, I am going to leave the state so that my wife and my 13 children can be moved out of the slums into this new housing project. Yes, I love my wife and my children, but we have discussed it and I will move out of the state because that's the only reason the government will allow us to move out of the slums. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine.
So I the I'm so sorry. The stories, the personalities, the husband who had
We'll give Dr. Stewart a moment to catch her breath there. This is a really, really important conversation, and I hope that you all are tuning in, that you're listening, that you're watching, that you're sharing, because, as she said, we need actionable outcomes for what has occurred, for what has occurred in the United States that is yet affecting Black families, Black children, Black men, Black women, and Black love.
I was thinking about the husband who lost contact with his wife because of separation during slavery, and she found him after enslavement, and he is begging her. He is telling her, "I love you as much as the wife that I'm now married to you. You will." He says, I love you as if you are myself." The beauty of the intimacy that they share in those letters. And he says, "Send me pieces of paper with a lock of each of my children's hair in it and their names on it." I mean, it is so powerful to see how Black people navigated the structural oppression that they had to deal with and its impact on their love lives. So I ask my readers to see the complexity of the people, even people who are weakened by these forces that weigh upon them, to see their humanity and to see their complexity, and to ask themselves, do you agree with me that this is a civil rights issue, and that the solutions that we're looking for are also long-term solutions? I don't fault any Black women for wanting to date outside of the race. I am not interested in policing people's marriage partners,
Right.
but I am aware that there are a number of Black women who want to be married to Black men. That's what they want, or want to be coupled with Black men. And we shouldn't have to date outside of the race because we don't have Black men to couple with. For me, that is not the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are too many issues unaddressed when we use that as a solution. So that's what I would like my readers to see. The other thing I would just say is I'd like my readers to rethink our approaches to patriarchal marriage. I would
Mm-hmm.
like my readers to pay attention to what I talk about in chapter 2 in terms of how Euro-Western patriarchal norms were inculcated in Black people after slavery. Black men were told, you must be the patriarchal head of your household. This would have been foreign to African people. There was no such thing as heads of households in African societies. So this is Euro-Western patriarchy. We've bought into it, many Black people, especially because these values have been seen as sanctioned by divine authority. We see them as biblically revealed. And I tried to deconstruct some of that in chapter 5 to help readers understand that we are not often actually very well cued into what was happening in the biblical world of the people who wrote what we call the household codes in the Pauline epistles, like
Mm-hmm.
wives be submissive to your husband and those
Right.
kinds of codes, slaves be submissive to your master. And so I'm writing a follow-up. I thought this was going to be the one book, but audiences are asking for more. So in the follow-up, I'm going to really take on that's, this is my expertise. I mean, I'm not a biblical scholar, but I'm definitely trained in the area generally. This is my expertise. So I really want to expand that discussion and help my audiences understand that these were people living in empire, living under the serious threat of death and annihilation and horrid death. And so they were doing everything possible to fit into the culture of the moment, of the time, so that they would go under the radar. Christians were not powerful in this period. Christians were being sought out in many respects, right? And were targets of death and annihilation. So they
Yeah.
were not writing a manual for all Christians for the rest of time to follow. They were in survival mode under
Yes.
fire. And so I really want to lay that out and bring my readers through that time period and also take on some of the issues that have to do with the divestment movement.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot the name of the there's a group of Black men now who are saying that they're pretty much divesting from Black women too.
The
I
passport bros or
Yeah,
the
yeah,
manosphere.
passport bros are the ones I've heard of. And
Yeah.
there are a lot of other complications that I think that they will face when it comes on to seeking love abroad.
Oh, they're already facing it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that works out for them because I mean, I'm originally from a developing nation. I was born in Jamaica. I came here when I was 3. So I grew up here and I claim African American identity as much as I claim Jamaican identity because I feel like I was deeply socialized in African American culture in this country. So I kind of know both sides of it personally in very personal ways. And it can be very, very tricky and very difficult to find true love in those ways because people have all kinds of motivations for why they would want to partner with a person with an American passport and American citizenship.
Yeah.
I'm not questioning, that this can happen and can happen in ways that are very nurturing and beautiful. But I think it's almost like needle in a haystack. It can be really tough. I don't think that we can get away from one another. When I ask Black women or Black men about their disdain for the opposite sex, I'm like, so is this how you feel about your mother and your father and your siblings? We are one another's keeper. We
Yeah.
are one another's brothers and sisters. Now we're at a place where we don't even find one another attractive or even interesting
and
or
and and again I would say that that is definitely a orchestrated narrative, a
yeah,
fed narrative. and
absolutely.
so and so if you're not aware of what has already been put into the water to
Yes,
poison perception, I
yes,
think you will buy into it.
that's exactly.
Dr. Stewart, we are running out of time.
Oh, I'm glad I was able to make it this long. Oh,
But this has been fabulous. This has been fantastic. I want to thank you for helping us to close out Black History with a bang. Again, Dr. Stewart tackles so many different issues in her work: Black women, Black love. It is available wherever books are sold. Dr. Stewart, do you have a site that people can go on to?
They can go to DianneMStewart.com. And there's a books page, and they can find all kinds of stuff. They can click on links and buy the book right there. There are links to Amazon, to my press, which is Seal Press, to a number of places, Target, Walmart, you name it. They're all there. And so it's Dianne with two N's, M Stewart, all lowercase, one word, yes.com. And they can find out much more about me and the work I do. And I have a media page where they can look at other kinds of interviews and programs that I've been in.
Well, thank you for your time today. I say blessings to you. And I appreciate you sharing your insights with us right here on Black Table Talk. Thank you so much, Dr. Stewart.
It's,
And I
it's,
wish you the best. Please take care of yourself and be well.
it's been a pleasure. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. All right. I do want to take a moment to see if we can have one person come through. Pastor Ben, if you are here with us and if you would like to just give some thoughts on the presentation today. I did send you an invite. I'm not sure if you are able to get that link. You can let me know in the comment section. This has been a fabulous conversation with Dr. Stewart today. I thank those of you all who were able to come. I do want to give a shout out and thank you to our sponsors. This show is sponsored by the We Dare Squad, a small group of individuals who is dedicated to kindness, one soul at a time. Thank you all for your attention today. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So we always encourage people to continue to go out, to be light, to share your insights. Here on Black Table Talk, we are all about Black power, Black people, Black family, Black uplift, and Black inspiration. I hope you have enjoyed today's broadcast. Thank you so much again for your time and attention. Take care, be well, and be light. All right, I believe we have Pastor Ben is going to give us some commentary. All right, good.
Good morning.
You hear us?
Okay, we've actually, I mean, she went in depth on a lot of. Yeah, I hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear
We
me?
are down to 2 minutes.
Okay,
Yes, we are down to 2 minutes.
okay. She actually went in depth on a lot of things that we've discussed on here. You know,
Yes.
and I like that because we understand where our struggle actually began, where it came from, the policies that's been implemented um, to basically keep us where we are. And this is a message that I think we need to kind of ingrain in our people's minds because we keep looking at us. While yes, we do need to come together, we also need to understand that there are things that have been put in place to to bring us to where we are and to keep us there. The sooner we can understand that and come together, the sooner we can work against it. But right now we're divided. And as you said, that was on purpose. That was by purpose. See, because now we got our black women chasing the bag. You know, if you ain't got the bag, I don't want to deal with you.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, listen, let's hook up and let's build this thing. See, let's build this together. It's now a separation. And we now have the men that somehow separated us like, man, our African American sisters, man, they you know, they all them want. It's not all women that's chasing the bag. Not all black women are chasing the bag. Some black women want real love.
Final thoughts, Pastor.
We got us as a people. We got to come together, get it straight, get our heads on right, and work together. We have to undo what they did. While we can't do it uh, directly, policy wise, right now, we need to do it within ourselves first. Come together as a community first. MLK, I'm gonna say this and I'm done. MLK, he brought us together first, then pursued what needed to be done. And that's what we got to start at. We have to come together first. I'm done.
Thank you, everyone, for your time and your attention. I did not want this thing to cut off on us because we have been having a fantastic discussion. Dianne, thank you again for your time and attention. Thank you again for writing this seminal work.
Thank
And
you.
I wish you the best in your next project.
Thank you very much.
Again, everyone, thank you for your time and attention. Catch the replay if you're just coming in. Share this broadcast out. Take care, everyone. Be well and be light.